Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
This is a Lead IQA Progress Review meeting, and today is the 16th of June 2025. The attendees are Anastasia Skromane, Assessor and IQA, Richard Marriott, Assessor and IQA as well, and Bernadette Chapone-Kish as a Trainee Lead IQA. So I'm going to record this meeting for the purpose of my own assessment as I'm doing this Leading IQA course. Do you have any objections?
No.
Okay, thank you. The reason of this meeting is to revise the IQA strategy and the work plan, which I put together and forwarded to the both of you. You both had objectives and 3 SMART targets to complete, and we need to see the progress of these actions, and we need to see if you need any support or if there are any amendments that we need to do to the work plan. So these activities that you needed to do would happen normally at the beginning of the academic year, but obviously it's June. But for the sake of my course work, we are doing this now as it was like September, October last year. Okay, so Anastasia, would you be so kind and explain your objective and your SMART targets to us?
Okay, so my objective was to ensure a thorough review of the scheme of learning against the adult ESOL core curriculum for REACH's E3 writing course. And I had to also ensure that REACH's scheme of work aligns with the expectations of the exam board, which is Gateway. So in order to complete the task, I had to liaise with REACH and get his scheme of work. And after he had sent me the scheme of work, I worked through my task and set some SMART targets.
Okay.
Should we discuss my observations and
Yes, please.
my notes on REACH's scheme
Yes,
of work?
please.
Okay, so I have identified some examples of good practice, and I thought that REACH's scheme of work is quite structured and thorough, and it complies with Gateway ESOL E3 writing framework. Namely, it includes units which align with Write Accurately and Write to Communicate specifications. It uses examples of authentic and functional tasks, such as, for example, write a postcard or complete a form. And also it includes SPAG activities and proofreading tasks. Okay. I have also found that it incorporates audience awareness and understanding of formal versus informal tone.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know if you would agree with that, Rich.
Yes, yeah, I'm pleased to see that was your reflection, because certainly my idea was that we would align with Gateway's framework in those ways. So the examples you've selected, I'm pleased that you've recognised that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and I have also set some SMART targets on how I see that you could improve and enhance your scheme of work. So SMART target number 1, again, this is my suggestion. I would suggest you include a more detailed breakdown of skills, grammar, vocabulary taught in each lesson, and how these link directly to your lesson objectives. Okay. And then also one of the other SMART targets is to include extension tasks for higher ability learners, and you could use learner profiles to tailor your writing goals. I also thought that it would be a good idea to integrate digital literacy into your sessions, and you could do that by simulating online form filling, teaching how to use spell check tools and formatting in Word. Okay. And also I thought that you could consider improving or strengthening your SPAG tracking by implementing the following approaches or strategies. So you could introduce weekly themed spelling tests, For example, set 10 to 15 words per week based on vocabulary topic. And also you could create a simple spelling progress tracker with date of the test, for example, number of correct responses, targets for next week, and notes on recurring errors.
Thank you. I mean, that was really useful. I particularly, value the suggestion of spelling test. I have used spelling tests in the past, and then I felt that, due to time constraints, they were dominating because of the way I used them, which was to then, as a writing tool as well, to get learners to encourage learners to write sentences with the key words in there as well. They were taking up quite a chunk of the lesson, so I abandoned that. But I think, in terms of recording progression and in terms of looking at the lessons learned from practice papers, mock papers, and seeing the level of spelling inaccuracy that persists, then it's a timely reminder to resume that activity. So that's really useful. And I think that the breakdown of skills, and particularly grammar, is really important. I mean, I think one of the things that I tend to do is adapt the skeleton scheme of work according to learner needs early in the course. So I think some of the grammatical priorities just identify themselves very quickly, and then I can adapt that. But I think there's no harm in being very explicit about that on the plan in terms of the checklist of what does need to be covered at some level. The extension tasks, I think I would they're included in my individual lesson plans rather than the overall scheme of work. So I do have differentiated tasks for higher level learners, but again, in terms of being explicit about that, particularly when there can be, as we know, there can be such a range of abilities in this entry 3 group.
And spiky profiles.
Absolutely. So it's about being really clear again about individual learner need and how to respond to that. Obviously, reactively as you go along through the course, but also from the outset in terms of anticipating some of those problems. So I think this really highlights some of the stuff I would like to be more explicit about in my scheme of work.
Thank you for your response, and thank you for your suggestions, Anastasia. It's a big help for me, obviously. So these tasks, as a lead IQA, I have so many things to do and set in the IQA strategy. If I needed to do everything myself as a full-time teacher, it would be extremely difficult. So this is why it is very important that my team is on board and everybody is chipping in and does their bits. So thank you for your suggestions. I agree with these, and thank you for reviewing Rich's active scheme of work. Rich, do you need any support with any of these implementations?
I think, as far as the digital literacy point is concerned, I think, I'd like to have some, maybe in terms of some team CPD in that area, because it's about making in this case, in every case, it's about making the digital literacy relevant again to the needs of the framework for this level. So the form filling, for example, were we to move to an online writing exam, then obviously that's going to be key. So but it's about anticipating that, but making sure, because one of the issues is for me that's come up in my objective is the issue of legibility with handwriting. So it's about balancing that need with the need for developing digital literacy as well. So
also these days people don't really write letters, emails, by hand anymore. So everybody uses tablets, laptops, their mobiles. Digital literacy is very important.
But if we're continuing to assess the exams in terms of handwriting.
Exactly.
then it's,
That is why I
Exactly.
brought that up, because I completely agree with you that
We
we don't handwrite as much these days as we used
maybe
to.
we should be moving towards that.
We tend to word process everything these days.
Yes. So, Team CPD, absolutely, we can do that. Do you think, Anastasia, that you would need
definitely.
that as well?
I would need that as well.
Yes, I think most people would need that. So I can arrange that, but also I need to liaise with our timetabling team, and maybe some of your lessons could be held in an IT room where all students can have their own computers and produce something for you, like a formal letter or a complaint letter or informal email or whatever. Okay, so I will take that side of this issue.
The other thing, in terms of the spelling tests, I don't know whether we would have agreement to standardise those. So we're taking them from the entry 3 vocabulary lists, and or whether we want to continue developing those independently according to the topics that we might be.
It's a good point, really, because that would make the delivery of the spelling test standardized as well. If we all agreed on the 20 words for each session for entry 3 learners or level 1s or lower
But then
levels.
again, it boils down to individual learner needs as well. One learner might be able to spell beautiful within an entry 2 class, but another might not be able to do that.
Even
But
on
then,
entry 3,
if we give them all the same words, then I think it would be better to see what the learner's weakest areas are, and then kind of take things from there.
But maybe just in terms of like a foundation level of keywords that are essential, because I think that comes up for me again in my objective about, well, what constitutes common and familiar words to be able to say, well, this is incorrect and they should be able to spell that. Then if we've got more agreement around what is essential and what would constitute a familiar an error in a familiar word or an error in a less familiar word.
And even which words we should be choosing for E1, E2 and E3.
Yes.
Yes, it's a good point. Maybe we could discuss this at the next team meeting when everybody is there, the next standardization meeting.
And I think it would relate to this point about a more detailed breakdown of vocabulary as well, because one of the things that I picked up on some of the papers that I've reviewed is consistently inaccurate spellings with certain adjectives, for example. So if we could easily have a feature on spelling of adjective. You mentioned beautiful, and more tricky spellings or common errors, and just again,
silent letters and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So would you be happy to tailor your active scheme of work a little bit and add some of these points to your, I know it's not your lesson plan, it's just the weekly rough plan for that session. Would you be happy to add some of these ideas?
Yes.
Maybe we can set a new deadline for Anastasia to review your active scheme of work again.
Yeah.
So how long do you think you would need? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I know we are busy these days, but some
of these things are easily embedded, so I would say a couple of weeks.
2 weeks, okay. So from now on, let's say
Beginning of July then?
beginning of July, yes. So let's say 1st of July, okay. So 1st of July will be the new deadline for Anastasia to review your active scheme of work.
Thank you.
Is there anything else, Anastasia, that you needed to do, or you covered your 3 SMART targets?
I think I covered everything, really.
Okay.
I haven't identified any areas of non-alignment. I thought that the scheme of work fully aligned with the gateway specs and framework. So I don't have any comments on that. But yeah, I think that's everything from me.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall we move on to Richard? And if you could explain your objective and your SMART target.
Okay, so my objective was to review some of the live entry 3 level 3 writing exam papers, and identify task types for future development points where we may require additional training, and from that to develop a standardization plan that would enhance our tutoring, assessing and IQAing skills and knowledge as a team. So specifically in terms of SMART targets, to draft a strategy, and then for Anastasia to proofread this draft, to plan activities for a standardisation meeting with the writing skill as a focus, and then to liaise with other team members to determine suitable dates and times to deliver the standardisation session.
All right. So,
yeah, I mean, what I did was to obviously review the papers first and foremost, and then from those to identify what I thought were key task types in terms of our need to liaise more as a team and to establish some clarity around standardisation. And that was in initially identifying common errors that learners are tending to make at entry level 3, but also alongside that, and in many senses prior to that, to really establish clarity as a team about, given the Gateway mark scheme, about areas of potential ambiguity, and to establish a consensus within the team about certain criteria, where they start and end. Some terms that may sound subjective, particularly with regard to writing, as we know. There's it's not black and white in terms of a correct response always.
So what I would like to add, sorry to interrupt, that we used to work with City and Guilds for years and years. All of us were familiar with that, and over the years we pretty much achieved a standardized way of seeing things. But last summer we changed the awarding body, and now we are with Gateway, which is new to everybody. And as you say, we see the different criteria differently.
Yeah.
We award different marks, and we really need to standardize the ways we see these particular points within the assessment. Okay, sorry.
Well, with that in mind, what I did, I developed the standardization plan, or the plan for the session,
Yes.
really as an introduction prior to establishing a strategy. So that was the document that I shared with you,
Yes.
because I felt that to get some agreement from you and then ultimately from you about whether that was the right direction to elicit I suppose the dialogue between ourselves as a team about what was required in terms of clarity, and then to go on and formalise that more in terms of a strategy. But really to start off with almost like a workshop that put us through the process as learners in some senses ourselves, looked at where we might fall down, looked at where we might review each other's performance differently. So
if you think about task one, the form, what were the things you felt like were not clear to you?
The plan essentially is about looking at each of the tasks in turn, either individually or in pairs, to develop answers that then we would share and correlate with what we've seen in terms of learner performance, in terms of potential areas of inaccuracy. So as you said, task one, the form is a really good starting point, because it's quite simplistic in terms of it's 1 mark for correct name, address and postcode, and then it's 1 mark for correct phone number and email address. So what could go wrong there? But we know that learners are going wrong, and we know that we are sometimes in some disagreement about, for example, I mentioned here, what we need to be clear on what we see as correct formation of those details. We need to learn from the errors that learners are making, so we can then embed correction or highlighting of those errors in lesson plans. And ultimately, we need to be clear about what we're going to accept or not in terms of responses. So I know we've talked informally, for instance, about the omission of the city or the town. So I marked one myself last week, and
that's a good
again,
one.
really good
We have to
high
do
level response, but there's no reference to Wakefield.
Exactly.
We just jump straight to the postcode after the line of first line of the address, and then the level of illegibility. Trying to read email addresses, discerning whether the email address is correct is obviously very difficult if we can't read it, and we don't know whether is that a dot? Are they clear about .com or So that there's the content issue, and then there's also the presentation issue around that. And again, it's two simple points two simple marks that learners should not be losing. But I know we've had disagreement about that. So
Task 2?
Task 2. I think Task 2 becomes much trickier because there are obviously a range of categories, and in some of those categories there are 4 marks, 3 marks, but despite the range of marks, there's often not for me, not sufficient clarity in differentiating between those marks. So we can have, for instance, I identified some points here about a reference to appropriate vocabulary and expressions for entry 3. It takes us back to the discussion we've just had.
What is appropriate to you? Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
Might not be appropriate to me.
Yeah.
Anastasia, you've had opportunity to mark some entry 3 writing exam papers. What was your feeling?
I felt that at times the mark scheme was a bit vague and too broad. That is what I felt. And what you have mentioned about the criteria being a bit too vaguely formed, and the fact that we have this wording that includes, for example, words like appropriate. How do we interpret that?
The words some and frequent. They're
Exactly.
so some errors or frequent
how
errors.
How many errors is that? Frequent. Is it 1, 2? Is it 5?
And also, I don't think we've really had a discussion about this as a team yet, which is about the level of the error. So, for instance, with punctuation, are we saying, well, okay, what a range of errors around misplaced commas, for example, we're going to be much more lenient than, for instance, somebody who's not using capital letters appropriately at the beginning of sentences.
And also with spelling, for example, it said some spelling errors are allowed.
Yes.
But how many? 2, 3, 5?
And then it says even in familiar words.
Exactly.
So it takes us back to, well, what are familiar words and what is our expectation?
Like for me, if an entry 3 student doesn't use capital I, I feel that is like an entry 1 mistake.
Yeah, true.
And I feel I'm saying that a lot, this entry 3, but particularly in terms of making the transition to a higher level, when people are still making errors with subject-verb agreement and making errors with plurals, missing off plural S's, etc., etc. This is something that we've really got to nip in the bud at entry 3 if people are going to progress to higher levels. And yet, the mark scheme in some respects seems to allow for an indulgence of those. Like you say, the capitalized I, one of us could look at that and say, well, it says, some errors are still, are acceptable if meaning is still understandable. Well, meaning is still going to be, there's no issue with comprehension. It's just that it's a glaring punctuation error for us.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I agree with that.
Okay, task 3, can we have a little chat about that?
Yeah, I think the key, the writing, it's the same criteria with 1 or 2 exceptions. Similarly, what I was proposing for the standardization session was that we had a look at we had a look at example answers and marked them and looked at any discrepancies in marking. But the key thing, so for both task 2 and 3, but for task 3, I think one of the key areas that I want to focus on is the issue of planning. Not only because it's worth 2 marks in itself, but also because clear, coherent planning leads to a better quality answer, as we know. So
and that would take me back to your scheme of work. Should we include some sessions on planning specifically? Should we incorporate them into our schemes of work where we practice planning, like how to plan, whether we use bullet points or mind maps, or I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah. So I think going back to again what we're all likely to accept or not, because I know from our initial experience that there's some discrepancy, because we might look at it and say, well, the content here is good. They've listed all the ideas, so it's more than a 0. Obviously, it's not a 2 because there's not any. There's no outline of structure. What are we going to expect? Really, it's all about expectation.
I came across an issue when I had to mark some of the E3 writing papers, and I think I resorted to your help, Rich, where I wasn't sure whether to award full marks for content or there was some content omission. So when it says content omission, how much content are we allowing for to be omitted?
And again, it's a value judgment about which of those how much weight do each of those bullet points carry. There's also, going back to the criteria of range of expression, there's also a discrepancy, I think. On one hand, within that category, it refers to paragraphing. So paragraphing is used for full marks, or it's not used for 0 marks. But then also discourse markers and connectives are used or not used. So what about, are we kind of balancing? Is it a balancing act if somebody's used paragraphing effectively but has not used any discourse markers? Where does that sit in terms of response? So again, it's about our expectation for each of these answers, and what we want to agree as essential, really, I think.
Exactly. So, have you had a chance to discuss the date of the next standardization meeting with the team? Do they have any suggestions when we should have it?
Yeah, provisionally we talked about obviously waiting until we've got the marking out of the way and classes have ended. So we were looking at the second week of July provisionally.
Okay, so this will be another deadline for us, maybe. So the 1st of July will be for Anastasia to revisit your active scheme of work, and maybe around 7th or 8th of July.
Yes, I think we don't want to overload people, but at the same time we want to strike while the iron is hot in terms of our, we're all bringing recent experience of marking that is going to be really valuable, I think, to share and resolve before we go forward next year.
Yes, and obviously I appreciate all of your hard work with this, and I was just gonna ask how hard you found this to do all of these practical activities alongside with your full-time job.
For me, it wasn't hard. It was just time consuming, I found, because I needed to go back to Gateway and specs, compare what you have included in your scheme of work with the Gateway framework and specs. So it wasn't really that hard, but it was quite time consuming.
I think for me, it was there was a fair amount of time, but it was very timely, because I've been going through this process, deliberating over some of these issues, so they came to mind very quickly. They presented themselves evidentially in the learners' work that I was marking and second marking. So it was quite timely in terms of it being very relevant to what I'm involved with at the moment, and obviously, as we've discussed informally, the need to establish as a team more clarity going forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The other thing, what you mentioned here, is the CPD, need for some CPD, which we always identify. So based on what we discussed today, I've been thinking about if you wanted, or if you think that everybody from our team could do the qualified assessor course, maybe. And
Yeah,
there
that
is
would be
also the
useful.
qualified IQA course,
Mhm.
which would be more specific what we need to do as an assessor, as an IQA. I don't know if you two of you would be interested,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then I could
definitely. I would be
ask
up
the
for
other
it.
members, so we could add this to
Yeah.
your CPD plan.
Definitely, because I think if anything highlights the need for that, it's writing, it's assessing the writing papers, because
Yeah.
they are very time consuming in themselves because of that degree of ambiguity throughout often.
Absolutely.
So anything that would develop our professional expertise in that area, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, in terms of standardization, are you happy with it to be quarterly, or you think we would need it more often? I know it's always the time issue again. Our Wednesday afternoons are put aside for this reason, but we always have other issues to discuss, so we can't just have standardization all the time. But do you think we should have it every month or every second month, or quarterly still okay?
Maybe quarterly would still be okay, considering we've only got 2 cohorts per year.
For me, it's one of those issues where I think if we invest the time now to get it right, then there's less need for ongoing standardization, because it's almost like if we don't address some of these issues now, then we'll just come back and revisit them in the next cohort.
Yeah,
So if we
they
invest,
tend to, sorry
Yeah.
for interrupting, but they tend to be cropping up before or after the exams.
Yes.
So around that time, I think,
So if
maybe
we-
even before exams.
we use this
I think.
opportunity now. Yeah, before would have been obviously
Yeah.
preferable, but afterwards we're learning from our experience and we're putting stuff in place. And if we invest some time in, as I said, this is a starting point for me really. This standardization workshop, if you like, and then to develop the strategy from there, to try and then test out how robust that is next time, and then to take it from there in terms of the frequency.
Exactly. And we know that you have many years of experience of teaching ESOL, but you are a new member in our team, and this is why I put you together with Anastasia to help you as your little mentor. But we have 3 other new members in the team, and I'm planning to pair them up with someone. So on the way leading towards the standardization meeting, they would have some guidance. But then I agree with you, having a robust standardization meeting at the very beginning, talk everything through, would
I think it
cause
would
less
benefit
problems
greatly
later.
the new members of our team if we have a standardization right from the start of the academic year, or even before that.
Yes, I agree with you. Okay, so I'm going to make all these changes to the work plan, and I will put the new deadlines in there, and the next standardization meeting. Thank you for liaising with the team. Thank you for all your hard work towards this meeting, and I really appreciate your help and input. Thank you. This is the end of our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.